motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
And I had an opponent that said yes. Number one on my mandatory said yes, and wasted my time for a week and just changed her mind. And then we had another one that said yes, and then changed my mind after a week, so wasted another fucking week. And I got to a point where I was like, why the fuck am I doing this? Like, seriously. Like, I honestly make so much money. I'm not fighting for money. I'm absolutely not. So I'm like, why do I even need to put myself through this roller coaster that boxing is? It's a fucking brutal sport, you know, outside of the ring more than in the ring. In the ring is the fun part. You know, the sport outside of it's more brutal. But then, you know, I grounded myself and remembered why I do this. I never started boxing for the money. I started boxing because I had goals, and my goals was to be world champion. Once I became a world champion, my goal was to become undisputed. So no matter how, you know, no matter what, obviously I want to make the money in boxing. I think I should be I deserve to get paid what I'm worth, which is a lot, you know, but at the same time, the goal is to be undisputed. And that's what keeps me focused. And that's what keeps me, you know, in the gym training and dieting and putting myself through this shit.
Reigning WBA bantamweight champion and Ebony's matchroom stablemate Nina Hughes caught wind of these comments and responded by saying, Ebony, if it's not about the money and the goal is to become undisputed, why do you keep turning down the fight with me by pricing yourself out and asking for too much money when a fight with me is the road to undisputed? Talking complete shit again. And I don't think Nina's being very genuine here, because essentially what she's talking about is Ebony Bridges coming off of a hand injury, subsequent hand surgery that kept her out for most of this year, straight into a unification match with her. I'd say that under those circumstances, it's prudent to ask for a bit more money.
It's what anybody would have did, not just Ebony.
Anybody and everybody would have played it that way, because who's going to come right off of a hand injury and hand surgery to go straight into a unification match? And Nina Hughes very recently stated that she offered to stand in for Avril Mathy after Avril dropped out injured, but who takes on a unification match? Who takes on a champion on short notice?
All Nina's doing is making it very obvious that she means to catch Ebony when she's vulnerable, under what are less than ideal circumstances for Ebony, but more than ideal for herself. And a fight's not going to happen under those circumstances. Ebony's got to take care of business this weekend against Miyo Yoshida. If she does, and I think she's going to, not only is Nina hot on her trail, but America's own Sharita Metcalf.
Sharita says, I'm getting the winner of this weekend's fight. It just so happens that Sharita Metcalf is in the pole position to become Ebony Bridges' mandatory challenger. So in some ways, Ebony has a choice. She can go ahead with what will likely be a mandated fight between herself and Sharita Metcalf, or she can circumvent that mandatory with the unification match against Nina for what would be the IBF and WBA titles. In some ways, Ebony has a choice. Sharita and Nina are very different fighters. Where Nina is an inside fighter, Sharita is a long-distance outside fighter. So it all depends on what Ebony wants to do and what she wants to have to deal with beyond Miyo Yoshida. Pick your poison. Do you want a war, mid-range to inside, or do you want to have to catch up to and keep on Sharita Metcalf long range on the outside?
With Nina, it's a question of who's the better inside fighter, Ebony or Nina. Whereas with Sharita, it's a question of can Ebony keep up with and keep on Sharita Metcalf. Usually, pressure fighters like Ebony have a lot of success against long-distance pure boxers like Sharita. So they're both winnable fights for Ebony.
It's just a question of which fight Ebony wants to go with beyond this weekend's fight. And as it pertains to this weekend's fight, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I like Ebony Bridges' chances to bang out and bust up Miyo Yoshida. You know, Miyo used to campaign as a super flyweight. She used to hold the title there, but she moved up in weight about 2 or 3 fights back, and she's been campaigning as a bantamweight ever since. Miyo Yoshida lacks the form, the function, and the ferocity for Ebony Bridges within close quarters. They both have the same sweet spot. They like to fight on the inside, but Miyo Yoshida, she wasn't a big puncher at super flyweight, and she still isn't one now. At bantamweight, Ebony Bridges, on the other hand, has real stopping power. She's a strong puncher.
Stronger, I think, than Miyo Yoshida by a lot. So I anticipate that Ebony Bridges will successfully defend the IBF title this weekend. She will win. And even though Miyo's never been stopped, I wouldn't be surprised if Ebony is the first to do it.
Should be a lot of fun. this weekend. But after that, for Ebony Bridges, the pressure is on. She's got a choice. Do you want to unify titles with Nina or take care of your mandatory challenger with Sharita? You've got to pick your poison. You've got to make a decision.
And I expect that Ebony will. Let's be honest, most of her biggest critics are criticizing her because she's fucking hot.
If she were more homely and humble and soft-spoken, I don't think people would take the time out to diminish her.
No way.
They see in Ebony Bridges as a woman attractive enough to be a centerfold, willfully using her feminine wiles to enhance her marketability. And there's nothing wrong with that, but to some...
Rub some people the wrong way. They don't like the precedents that it sets. But the old saying goes, if you've got it, flaunt it.
Same way you have to use every advantage you have inside of the ring is the same way you have to use every advantage you have outside of the ring to sell yourself and become more marketable. I don't fault her for what she's doing. I enjoy it.
Because she's fucking hot.
She shouldn't have to apologize for that. Look for Bridges versus Yoshida this weekend on the undercard of Prograis versus Haney. In men's welterweight news, Bozy Ennis, the father and trainer of Jaron Ennis, says Boots is faster and stronger than Terence Crawford.
Then he should have fought him when he had the chance.
Because he did have the chance, and we've been all through that. Don't wait up until after he has the big Spence fight and is attached to a contractually obligated rematch clause to start talking about how Boots is so much bigger and stronger. You had your chance to prove it where it counts the most, and you chose to go the other way. Now, Bozy understands where Crawford is coming from. However, popularity notwithstanding, the famed trainer is convinced that Crawford is an incredible fighter, but when juxtaposed to his son, it isn't even close. And really, what's he gonna say? Not only does he train the guy, he's his father.
Right.
Boots is faster, stronger, and has more attributes than Terence.
Oh, is that why a man named Karen went 12 rounds with him?
Context being key. A fighter of that caliber, of that grade, going 12 rounds with Terence Crawford, he'd get crucified for it. It wouldn't be allowed. But that same Karen Chukatsian went 12 rounds with Jaron Ennis, who is supposed to be bigger and stronger than Crawford.
Karen Chukatsian ahead of that fight was a rather unheralded welterweight with no signature victories, no notoriable wins, and not much of a profile. So the fact that grade of fighter, that caliber of fighter, that hasn't even really been tested at world level, was able to go the distance with Boots, it says a lot.
But Bozy continued, we've got a lot of weapons. You ain't seen nothing yet. It would have helped if we would have seen more of those weapons in the Karen Chukatsian fight, because it looks to me like movement hampers Boots' offense. Movement hampers his power. I do think he's a strong fighter and a strong puncher, but I noticed it was the angles and the pivots.
Movement bothers him.
Terence Crawford can move. He's got pivots, but he mixes in offense with his movements, hooking on the turn, hooking off of those pivots to catch the other man as he's turning with him.
It's what he did to Sean Porter, among several others, and I think that's what he'd do to Jaron Boots Ennis, who was flummoxed by mere pivots.
Flustered by a fighter that was only fighting half of a fight. Now, needless to say that because Terence is attached to a Spence rematch and he is contractually obligated to oblige him, a fight between Terence and Jaron Ennis isn't happening.
So what is?
Jaron Ennis up until this point has been boxing exclusively on a Showtime platform. He wasn't actually a Heyman fighter, a PBC guy, but now that Showtime is out of boxing, there is a question as to what happens next for Boots and where should he go.
Should he try to go into business with Al Heyman and see about boxing on the Amazon platform, or should he go somewhere else? Should he go to Top Rank? Should he go to Matchroom?
Boots Ennis, one of those.
Yes, Boots
His
Ennis.
father's come out today and said he doesn't want to see him fight Conor Ben.
He doesn't want to fight. I mean, we're talking to Boots Ennis anyway about other stuff.
Boots Ennis, one of those? Yes, Boots His father's come out today and said he doesn't want to see him fight Conor Ben. He doesn't want to fight. I mean, we're talking to Boots Ennis anyway about other stuff.
I feel like the PBC may have more of the names that Jaron Boots Ennis needs. Names like Keith Thurman, Mario Barrios, Montes Stanionis, so on and so forth. But I also wonder about their ability to promote him, to keep him out there and keep him active, because they only have 12 to 14 fight dates to work with, which is substantially less than what they used to have back when they were in bed with Fox and Showtime. You were looking at over 30 fight dates. Now they're down to just 12 or a little over 12. And many of those fights, they're pay-per-views.
They're behind a paywall, which is less than ideal if you're trying to raise a fighter's profile.
The way I see it, Unless Jaron Ennis has some certainty that he'll get Mario Barrios or a Montestanionis or Keith Thurman, unless he can have some assurances that he will get those fights and some assurances that they'll keep him busy, keep him active. We're talking about 2 to 3 fights a year because this guy isn't well known yet.
The PBC don't have as many fight dates as they used to, and some fighters' fights are going to take priority over others. So what assurances does Jaron Ennis have that he'll get to be busier next year than he was this one?
Because he needs to be. I understand that the PBC may have 2 or 3 names that would be good fights for him, but are those fights actually going to get made? And unless they're going to keep Boots active, unless they're going to get him out there 2 to 3 times, either headlining his own shows or at least being the co-main event to some of them, I don't really think he should go over there. Fight dates aren't an issue if he goes to Matchroom. He doesn't have to worry about fight dates.
But he does have to worry about what names they can get him. He does have to worry about opponents. As far as keeping him busy, Matchroom can do that. They can keep him busy.
But what names can they get him? The reality is, as much as Bozy Ennis is trying to attach his son's name to the name of Terrence Crawford, that's not the best means of promotion for him. The best means is to keep him busy, keep him active, and keep people talking about him. Not the same tired conversation about Terrence Crawford, but what he's actually doing and who and when he's actually fighting, because he needs to be more active.
So we'll see where he goes.
Now, as it pertains to the ongoing story about PBC jumping into bed with Amazon Prime, moving forward for a tweet from Rick Glacier, it looks like Stefan Espinoza has landed on his feet, as the fucking weasel has been hired by Al Heyman to run the production team for PBC's new platform deal with Amazon. Thankfully, he won't be unemployed and living off the government. Espinoza will likely hire some of his old cronies from Showtime that were cut loose when Showtime left boxing and mixed martial arts. Some did wonder what would become of the former Showtime Sports president, Stefan Espinoza, now that Showtime doesn't have a sports wing and they're not doing sports anymore. It appears he's going to be in charge of production, which is not necessarily the same role or the same assignment that he had at Showtime. At Showtime, he was sports president. Showtime Sports president in charge of sports. The title sounds a lot loftier than it actually is, because what it really is, or was a quality control officer in charge of overseeing all of their sports content, not exclusive the boxing matches via the PBC. That also included mixed martial arts via Bellator and whatever sports documentaries they may have been working on. Essentially, Stefan's role was to oversee that content to ensure that it's bringing in the desired metrics for the Showtime platform, as Showtime is investing money in them. Now, needless to say, he didn't do a good job of that, because if he had, he'd still have one. He would still have a job with them. It was under his watch that Showtime Sports as a wing was run into the ground.
The least Al Heyman can do is give him a job.
Though you do have to wonder if he will be making in this new role what he was making in the previous one as Showtime Sports president. The people at the PBC and Showtime Sports grew far too happy with themselves based on what previous success they had in the previous era with Floyd Mayweather.
Floyd's retired.
And since his retirement, Stefan Espinoza hasn't been able to keep up those numbers or have that same success with any of the other fighters on the Showtime platform. The PBC guys, most of the PBC shills and Heymanites only want to talk about the success they've had this year, what turned out to be the 5th and final year of their existing deal that Showtime and Paramount decided not to renew, the deal they struck back in 2018.
Turned out to be a 5-year deal, and for most of that 5-year deal, really 4 of the 5 years, you were putting up piss poor numbers, so that in the 5th and final year, you finally start making fights that move the needle, but by then, you're a day late and $1 short.
Now the team that was at Showtime seems to be migrating over to Amazon Prime, Stefan Espinoza among them, per Rick Glacier's sources. Oftentimes, when Rick releases this inside intel, Heymanites more than anyone like to question its validity. But if we do end up seeing Stefan going over there, that would have to mean that Rick was right and the intel is good. Oftentimes, what people get all caught up in is whether or not they like Rick Glacier or they like what he's saying, when it's not about what you like. It's not about you. It's about whether or not the intel is good. And if Stefan ends up over there, that means the intel was good and Rick wasn't lying.
What the fuck is wrong with these people? You want the news should be delivered based on your mood and what your preferences are?
Go to Burger King if you want to have it your way, because the news is what the news is, whether you like it or not. It's not going to be specifically tailored to you and what your preferences are.
What the fuck is wrong with these guys?
Now, rumor has it that Gervonta Davis will be the one to kick off the newly inked Amazon deal, with his next fight set to go down in March of next year, approximately 11 months to the date of his last fight with Ryan Garcia. That's close to a year. I heard a rumor that the Spence versus Crawford fight is what's supposed to be going down in March, but neither would surprise me.
On that side of the street, you've got Frank Martin, you've got Edwin De Los Santos, and of course, you've got Isaac Cruz, who widespread rumors seem to indicate he's going to be the one that Gervonta Davis ends up fighting.
Said it many times that I do feel commercially a second fight with Isaac would do better than the first, because the first time out nobody knew Isaac, nobody had heard of him, but he acquitted himself well in that Gervonta Davis fight, so a rematch might do a little better commercially. Emphasis on a little better. It's not going to do what he just did with Ryan Garcia earlier this year, and the theory is that because it's being marketed on Amazon, a huge platform with over 200 million subscribers.
How many of them are boxing fans? How many of them are there for sports? Hell, how many of them are there for Prime Video? Yes, Amazon is a huge platform, but that doesn't mean that people are going to purchase whatever pops up in these suggestions.
I don't. If I go on Amazon looking for a watch, Fitbit or something like that, I purchase the watch and I keep it moving. Just because they're marketing the card on a very big platform doesn't necessarily mean it's going to bring in very big numbers, because at its base, you're still catering to the same audience.
People who watch boxing. And for the people who watch boxing, not just watch it, but actually spend money to see it, is this card a hot card, a hot ticket?
That's what the numbers will tell us, how hot it is or how hot it ain't. I can't fight the feeling that they're going to go to this new platform, they're going to go to Amazon and repeat the same mistakes that got them booted off of Fox and booted off of Showtime.
Just gonna go somewhere else and do the same fucking thing.
If history is any indicator of things to come, that's what'll happen.